Welcome, everyone, to the sixth episode of the Open Throne Podcast. I'm your host, Cole Houck, and today I'm joined once again by my good friend, Austin Greene. Very happy Wizards fan. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's been a magical week since the trade deadline. I'm just so happy. Feel like I have a purpose again. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it is good to see hope in Washington again, man. I've been saying for a minute now, you guys need something to latch onto. And obviously you had got that with Keyshawn and Alexar this year, but before the trade deadline, it was a lot to hold on to, but it wasn't gonna be, it wasn't like locked and loaded, ready to have like a successful future for sure. Now it's like if everybody stays healthy, it is guaranteed you guys will have some success playoff, appearances at the bare minimum.
For sure. I mean, there was definitely stuff to be excited about with the young core we were building because you have Alex Sarr, you have Keyshawn George, you got Trey Johnson now this year, you got Bilal Coulibaly, you got Bub Carrington. So there are already pieces to be excited about. Whereas if you go backward a few years to when it was Beal with his new no trade clause and the pieces we had around him, it was rough basketball to watch. At least even if Wizards basketball hasn't been the most winning style of basketball this year, there have at least been interesting and fun pieces to watch. Like we got to watch Keyshawn George run the point for quite a few games, and that was really fun. And it's been a team with good vibes overall this year. And having CJ McCollum when he was here earlier in the season was great for team chemistry and things of that nature. But yeah, there had been some rough points in the years before then. And so getting Trey Young and Anthony Davis at the deadline, it means next year is going to be so, so, so exciting.
I know. Yeah, you really sped up the process as far as letting the young guys develop. You bringing in veterans that have been around for a little while and have had winning programs. Trey Young, a little less so than Anthony Davis, but they've both showcased that they can carry teams to a certain extent. Putting around the young guys you just talked about, it should be a lot of fun to watch. So, what was your thoughts, I guess, about the trade deadline as a whole? Not just your Wizards guys, but how any kind of instant reactions to everything that you enjoyed or you didn't like?
Well, I would say there was definitely a lot more movement than I was expecting. The Wizards trade for Trey Young was, I'm pretty sure, the first trade of the year because there hadn't been any trades up to the point before we reached like 2 weeks before the deadline. And then the Trey Young trade happened. And then there was still just a lot of silence on that on the trade market. And then you had the Harden trade request, and then Jaren Jackson Jr. got traded seemingly out of nowhere, and it just felt like all the dominoes started toppling, and it was just a crazy trade deadline. One might say it was the craziest trade deadline ever. If not, it's definitely got to be up there because there were a lot of pieces that moved. And even though we didn't get a Giannis trade or a Jaw trade, like you had Jaren Jackson Jr. move, you had Anthony Davis move, you had Trey Young move. You had Kristaps Porzingis move. Jonathan Kuminga, thankfully, finally got separated from the Warriors. You had Vucevic to the Celtics. You had just so many different moves. None that were huge, I feel like, balance shifters, but definitely a lot of teams making impactful moves that would make a big difference for them next year. It felt like the big theme of this year's trade deadline was this year's kind of set in terms of how it's going to be. Get ready for next year.
Yeah, that was really annoying me. I talked about that in the most recent podcast coming out today. Was that I didn't really understand why Eastern Conference teams weren't fighting more for this year. Like the next year is going to be much more difficult in the Eastern Conference. I said before, Jason Tatum's coming back, Halliburton's coming back. Your Wizards look really solid on paper if everybody stays healthy.
Yeah.
Everybody should remain about where they are for the teams that didn't go more all in, or like I said, the guys coming back on the teams I just mentioned. So I don't know why other Eastern Conference teams didn't keep pushing like they were, or like waited for next year when the hole is clearly right now. Teams like the Knicks, the Magic, just stuff like that.
Yeah, that's definitely a fair point. You definitely have the Pistons at the top of the Eastern Conference. The Celtics are still a very legitimate threat in the East, even without Tatum. And then you have the Knicks, and you've got some other good teams, but it's still definitely not as intense at the top. But I don't know. Maybe it's just a sense of foreboding that it's not going to matter because whoever comes out of the East is going to get destroyed by the West. But whatever the case ends up being, people seemed pretty happy to stay pat with where they were. I do think it'll create a very interesting dynamic, though, for next year, because even if the Eastern Conference doesn't get back to being as good as the Western Conference, it is definitely going to be a far more competitive Eastern Conference than we're used to this year. I think we might actually reach the point where, like, we have the fewest number of teams tanking than we have had in a while. Because each year, whether it's been this year in particular, but last year, even the year before that a little bit, 2024, even though that was a weaker draft, like you always had teams that were clearly tanking. I don't think you're going to find too many teams clearly tanking next year. I think there's going to be a lot more teams being competitive.
I mean, I know the Jazz and the Wizards not going to be tanking, right? That's for sure. Those two teams that are tanking right now are not going to be tanking anymore. I don't know
Yeah,
that I can agree with you because the tanking is horrendous this year. Like it is the
it
worst that
is.
it's ever been. There are at least 10 or eight at least tanking teams that want that number one overall pick and are showing it night in and night out. You guys included. So it's just I don't. I wish I could say that's true. I'm not sure I have faith in it like you do. But we'll wait and see.
We will. I mean, Indiana's not going to be tanking next year when they have Halliburton back. I don't think New Orleans should be tanking. They should be trying to win with their core and with Zion, or even if they move off of Zion. Dallas, I guess I don't really know what they're. I mean, they're going to try and build around Cooper Flag, and they'll probably lose games in the process. But I don't think it'll be a terrible taint jog. Memphis, maybe. Memphis might be a pretty real consideration for tanking next year because they're gonna move off of John in the offseason. And Brooklyn, given all the young guys they have, still probably isn't gonna win a ton of games. So I think there'll still be a few, but it's going to be a lot less.
I think Chicago is going to be tanking. Finally, they've been avoiding that, just been mediocre for the last however many years they've had the veterans
Yeah.
over there. They're finally looking like they chose a direction. Miami could choose a direction, not holding out for it. They're still Miami, still have Pat Riley, Eric Spoelstra. I'm sure they're going to win games, but there's always
Yeah,
a
they don't
chance.
seem like the kind to tank.
They they're neither Chicago, but we finally figured something out here. And then I had another team too that I thought was going to tank. Oh, the Clippers. Yeah, I think the Clippers are also going to start tanking next year. They just traded James Harden. I think eventually they realize they don't have any picks, or I'm not sure. I just think the Clippers are going to start losing once the Kawhi thing comes down and Kawhi gets really old and he's injured again. It's just all signs point to them
Yeah.
losing games. I feel like next
I
year.
I was watching the Clippers play the Rockets last night, and Kawhi was playing great. But watching that team, aside from Kawhi Leonard, it is a very bare bones roster. And like the league still hasn't doled out any kind of punishment or fine or anything for the aspiration scandal in the offseason. And if they do decide to drop the hammer on that, there's no telling what that could end up being. And if you remove Kawhi Leonard from that team, especially since they traded Zubac, like they're just left with nothing at that point. So for I guess the sake of the whole league, I hope they still continue to play well this year. Because I don't want OKC getting that top 8 pick. That would really, really suck. But aside from that, the next year is probably going to be a down year for them.
That's what I was thinking. But you're totally right about people like the Pacers and a couple of those teams like the Wizards and Jazz as well. All those teams should be trying to win more, in theory. I don't know what's happening to the Pelicans. I actually went on a rant the last episode about how the Pelicans and Kings, they like tear my brain up. I don't know what to do with those franchises, and I wish they would just resolve their problems that they clearly have, but they're ignoring. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. But I want to talk to you specifically about the Anthony Davis trade because I know you're really happy with AD and Trey Young coming to this team.
Very.
Really excited to see what it looks like next year. What was your first thoughts about Anthony Davis trade on the fourth?
I was very happy. But actually, when I first saw the notification, I thought it was like a scam. I thought it was NBA Centel or something like that. I was like, there's no way my Washington Wizards just traded for Anthony Davis. Because I got a notification. I think it was from Sleeper before I actually did from Shams and ESPN. So I was like, is this real? And then I went to Shams's page and I checked and I was like, oh my God, this is really happening. And so then, of course, my thought was like, oh, what did we give up? And then I saw the return and it's like we didn't lose any one series from like our young core. We got off of Middleton's expiring contract, which I did say earlier on that we were probably going to trade him at the deadline for something because he was an expiring to make the salaries work. And ultimately, between that, I mean, I was kind of a fan of AJ Johnson, but it's not like he was really doing that much for us. I mean, it's just a fan of him as a player. But that, and then the fact that we didn't have to give up any of our own draft capital, I was ecstatic. Even if Anthony Davis has had his health issues, he's still a very dominant force when he plays. And I was even more happy when the Wizards said, we're giving you the rest of the year to recover. Go take care of yourself. Get fully healthy for next year. Because that's definitely the mindset they should be taking.
You knew
There's
they were
no
going to do
point.
that. Come on.
I was hoping they would, and they did not disappoint me. Although I do find it interesting. Anthony Davis was not the Wizards' first choice when they were looking at targets because they wanted to get another big man. They first called like it was the Knicks to see if Cat was available, and then the Kings to inquire about Sabonis before they reached out to the Mavericks about Anthony Davis. So I'm imagining in my mind, I'm like, what if we had Cat paired next to Sar, or what if we had Sabonis? And I think they'd be interesting fits, especially with Cat stretches the floor a little bit more than AD, and Sabonis is. I view him as more of like a point forward, the way he can facilitate. But I think the combination of Alex Sarr and Anthony Davis will probably work best out of the three that they mentioned, just because Sarr can stretch the floor a little bit, but he can also play the five. And Anthony Davis has made it clear in the past that he much rather prefers playing the four to the five. And I think if you have those two together for a Twin Towers dynamic, you can block a lot of shots and you can have some very good defense.
Yeah, I had no idea this Sabonis was on the market for you guys. I didn't realize you guys reached out about the Kings or the Knicks for Sabonis or Cat. That was news to me. I knew people were talking to Cat because there was rumors about that, and obviously the Kings are the worst team in the league. They've lost 13 straight games. We'll talk about them in a little bit. So I figured that they would be a couple of guys who were on the market for them as well. But I didn't know the Wizards were interested about that. I mean, I said I didn't know the Wizards were trying to make moves like this now. And I was also shocked, especially for the Dallas side of this, that they were not able to get a single one of you guys' picks, not even
Hmm.
protected. Now, maybe in theory, they don't want you guys' picks. You notice you guys are going in the right direction and you're getting win now players, but it's still players with injury concerns, especially Anthony Davis, that you don't know 100% if they're going to be. You don't know what they look like in a couple years. They made stuff may happen in 3 more years following that. You're not 100% sure. So it's interesting that that was what happened. I'm glad you guys didn't give up any of that. Um, I don't care much for AJ Johnson. I mean, Milwaukee gave up on him after like 30 games. So clearly,
He's a fun player to watch more than anything when he gets going. He's very athletic.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess. Yeah, I can't believe you guys got they guys was an OKC pick, was the only first round pick. Oh, and then the Warriors pick too, but that was top 20 protected. I mean, neither of those are really that good of assets. I mean, that's a 30th pick first guaranteed, and then a top 20 pick in 2030 protected as well.
With Anthony Davis, you have to keep in mind the Mavericks. I mean, there had been reports that they weren't looking to move him at all, but with AD, he's out of his prime and he's incredibly injury prone. His injury history is terribly long, and so the Mavericks aren't exactly maximizing value. It's not like they're trading him in 2019 or like even 2017 when he's like at the height of his powers. This is a much older, different version of Anthony Davis who can still do a lot of the same things, but you can't justify getting like high value first round picks for this version of Anthony Davis, given that you don't know if he's even going to be on the court.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Aside from Anthony Davis, too, this is just such a fleece job the more I look at this. I mean, you guys also got Jaden Hardy, who's a 23-year-old, relatively knockdown shooter. He's been shooting 38%, his entire career. And then D'Angelo Russell as well, who's also, he's been up and down for a while, but he's still an NBA player, averaging double-digit points or around there.
Um, Yeah, well, I will say I'm a big fan of Jaden Hardy. I've been a fan of his since high school. D'Angelo Russell is not going to play a minute for the Wizards. The Wizards are already are working with D'Lo to kind of figure out what's going to make the most sense for him, whether it's waiving him or like if he sits out the rest of the season. But he's not going to play for us.
Oh, I hadn't heard that. I looked at it. He was out with an illness is all that I saw. He was out for
Oh,
tonight's game with an
he
illness.
he might he might have an illness of some kind, but he's probably not going to suit up for the Wizards.
I don't think he has an illness. I thought y'all would be sitting him the entire year like you are Anthony Davis and then bringing him back next year. I didn't realize that he was going to get waived or cut or sign and
They'll
trade or
they'll
whatever.
probably figure something out in the off season, but yeah, I would not expect him to play.
Okay, so and you guys already cut Dante Exum as well. That was the other piece in this trade that the Wizard had received. So it's pretty much just Jaden Hardy and Anthony Davis for contract filler. Marvin Bagley, who was surprisingly good for you guys, at least numbers wise. He's still Marvin Bagley, but he was shooting like almost 50% from three.
Yeah, no, he definitely was a serviceable big man for us. I do think part of it was empty stats, but you know, it wasn't. He played decently at times. I gotta hand it to him. He wasn't bad.
Yeah. So talk to me about what the starting lineup should be for next year's Wizards, because it seems like you guys are just coasting, trying to lose games. I mean, Sharif Cooper is playing every fourth quarter now. Haven't heard his
I
name in
love
four
Sharif
years.
Cooper.
Yeah.
He's
Come on now.
he's another player I've been a huge fan of since high school, and obviously his professional career did not get off to the right start. But I do still think there is a ton of potential with that man, especially coming into his prime. But
Even in his
regardless,
college career, he hadn't done anything since high school. That's why you like him so much. Wasn't he like a 47th pick or something?
yeah, yeah, he was. And you know what? That's where the hidden gems are. But
That's right.
regardless, next year, Wizards obviously starting Trae Young at point guard. Probably will be Trey Johnson at the two. And then how the rest of the lineup comes down to kind of depends on who the Wizards end up drafting. I would imagine they're trying to look to draft. I mean, obviously you draft the best player available, but someone that's more of a three or a four, thinking an AJ DeBonsa or maybe a Cam Boozer type of player. In my mind, AJ DeBonsa is kind of like the perfect pick in terms of fit for us. But, there's obviously a lot of other factors to consider. But you have hopefully what ends up becoming a top three pick in that lineup. And then you have for the final two spots some combination of Keyshawn George, Alex Sarr, and Anthony Davis. I think some of that depends on injury health, if they're trying to run a Twin Towers kind of lineup or if they're trying to play small ball. Because Keyshawn George is definitely a starter level player, but at the same time, if Anthony Davis is healthy, you can't not start Anthony Davis. And Alex Sarr is pretty damn good too. So you could have Keyshawn George off the bench as like a six man of the year kind of candidate, which if he does come off the bench, I could totally see him winning six man of the year. And then you'll have Bilal Coulibaly off the bench too. So you got a very, very solid top seven, and then still Bub Carrington after that. So, and then you'll have more depth down the bench. But the starting five for next year, if we nail this pick in the 2026 draft, it's gonna be looking scary, for the Eastern Conference. Other teams better watch out.
Yeah, again, if you guys get what you guys are going to get, I looked at a top seven pick. If you guys, the season ends today, it'd be the worst you can get is top seven. Still plenty of options. This draft is very, very deep. Most of the lottery is
Hmm.
probably going to projected to be an all star at some point in their NBA career. You guys also have the hardest remaining schedule of all the teams that are fighting for lottery, the number one pick. The two teams above
Yes,
you are the Pacers and the Sacramento Kings. Half game behind the Pacers. They have a similar enough strength of schedule remaining, but theirs is a little bit harder. The Sacramento Kings actually has the second easiest schedule. So even though they had lost 13 in a row, matter of fact, the last time that they had lost or they had won was actually against you guys almost a month ago, believe it or not.
really.
So yeah,
We bring
yeah,
out
that
the
was
best in other teams. What can I say?
That's right. That's right. So that was fun to find out. And then yeah, so Sacramento Kings, second easiest schedule. They should be winning more games. They still have plenty of veterans. They're not tanking necessarily. They're just losing. Shout out to Russell Westbrook. So I think you guys have a pretty good shot to get like a top five pick at worst. And I don't see a world, assuming that you guys do get a top five pick. I don't really see a world where Keyshawn George comes off the bench. I mean, I like Keyshawn George a lot. I don't really want him to be a bench player. If that's what you need, Trey Young and Anthony Davis are healthy. I can kind of understand that. But what are you looking for if you can draft anybody in this draft, top five? Who would you want on this team, and what would that starting five be?
I mean, I would want to know, obviously, who pans out. You can't really tell. The draft is a crapshoot to some extent. But looking at this roster, I would try to draft for fit. Like I like Darren Peterson, but I don't think he would make sense on a team with Trey Young, really, and some of the other guards we have, because we have a lot of guards. It makes more sense in my mind. AJ DeBonsa, in my mind, is the perfect pick because he's a forward and he could slot in my mind, well, at the three or the four. He can shoot, he can do a little bit of everything. He is a plus defender, and he's just seems like a winning player to me. And I think you could slot him in very well with kind of the lineup I had imagined. And that's a very tall front court that you end up having if you're the Wizards with him. I also like Caleb Wilson a lot. Destroyed, sadly, destroyed Duke
Yeah,
the other
yeah,
day.
yeah.
All right. But he's definitely more of a four than a three. But that jumper is silky smooth, and he's such a good shot blocker. And the upside with him is just crazy high, and he's just intense. Like he's got the killer instinct in my mind. I see that in him. So I feel like DeBonster or Caleb Wilson are honestly the two prospects I'm most excited about. It's not that I wouldn't be excited by Cam Boozer. He definitely seems like the most durable and reliable player, the one with like probably the highest floor in the draft. But in terms of looking at upside down the road and like who could turn into like a star or something really special, I see Boozer as having a higher floor and a lower ceiling. And I see a guy like Caleb Wilson or AJ DeBonsa as probably a little bit of higher risk, but also the ceiling being so much higher. And if you can strike gold on one of those guys with a really high ceiling and pair that in with an already good team, you could truly have something special in a few years. So I'm really hoping it ends up being one of those two, but we'll see more as we get closer to the draft, how March Madness goes, and how these guys do with their various pre-draft workouts.
Yeah, I think those two make sense. I really like AJ Dubbanza for you guys the most out of anybody. I think it's just the easiest slot in. I don't really consider Caleb Wilson to be a four. Like I think it's fair that he plays a four at college. I can't remember last time I saw a 6'10" guy play the small forward in college, right?
Yeah,
But I think in the NBA, he's got kind of a Kevin Durant build, maybe a Michael Porter Jr. role. Obviously, he does more, he drives more, and passes more than Michael Porter Jr.
he
does.
does, and he
But
likes his post up game a lot.
yeah, yeah, that's true. Which I guess does kind of entail a four in the NBA. But yeah, he does have really nice mid range, like turnaround mid range,
It's
back to
so
back at
nice.
post. It is so fun to
Yes,
watch. Anyways,
it's so
so I
smooth.
like him a lot. I think he'd be good for you guys. Same with AJ. AJ's got. I think AJ is the best fit. I thought that boy before. He convinced me the rest of the way on him. I really like Cameron Boozer a lot in this draft. Maybe it's just because he has like a really high floor and we're seeing it at Duke, and that's just like
Yeah,
easy to translate to the NBA level. I think
for
he has
sure.
blown me away this year. My issue is I'm not sure what he's supposed to look like in Washington. That would be like
Yeah, I feel
he
that.
would take over Anthony Davis's role in a way offensively.
Kind
You
of.
know?
Yeah. And what also worries me is that there isn't a draft where all three top picks like truly, truly pan out. Like in most drafts, if you're top three, there's one guy that just at least that isn't what you thought he was going to be. And as great as this draft is, odds are Darren Peterson, Cam Boozer, and AJ DeBonsa are not all going to turn into all-star, all-world players. One of them inevitably, even if they still have a solid career, is just not going to be as good as the other two or the top one. And so in my mind, I'm trying to figure out who that is. Is this going to be a loaded draft still? Yes. I think I was doing some research on it before this. Most NBA drafts average 5 all-stars in the class by the time it's all said and done. There are some that are really good drafts that have 6. For example, the 2012 NBA draft, that was the one with Bradley Beal, Anthony Davis. That was a really good draft. 2011 was also a solid draft. Most of them have 5. Some of the really bad ones have like 3. The 2013 NBA draft, for example, that was Giannis, Victor Oladipo, and Rudy Gobert. Not a great draft. The newer ones, it's a little bit too soon to tell, but the the 1996 draft that had 10 all-stars, the 2003 NBA draft that had 9 all-stars. It's very possible that this draft ends up being like an 8 or 9 to have all-stars, and that's still an incredible amount, and there's a ton of value in the lottery and then even throughout the first round. But I also have to remember that not every guy's going to translate and be a star. And so it's trying to figure out who those are going to end up being. That's the task at hand for these teams. And so if I'm the Wizards, I'm really trying to find that guy that could end up being like truly a franchise changer. Like there's a very solid chance the Wizards end up with the number 1 overall pick. And we haven't had a number 1 overall pick since John Wall. And if we have that pick, I really want to nail it. And I want this to be a guy who in 20 years I'm looking and like seeing, three banners in the rafter and being like, yeah, we're retiring that guy's jersey. That's the kind of player I want from this draft.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think it's interesting what you said about the top three not really panning out. I was going through my head, even like older, the best drafts ever, and then also more recent drafts have been really good. I like the 84 draft, the '03 draft, where you got Michael Jordan, you got LeBron. Those, they still had their Sam Bowie's of the world, their
The
Darkos of
Darko
the world.
Milicic. Yep,
Yeah, yeah. And then
exactly.
also think about like the best drafts most recently. Think about, 2021, think of 2018. That still had, DeAndre Ayton didn't pan out all that well. Marvin Bagley was not nearly what people thought he was going to be. And even like in 2021, Jalen Green hasn't panned out how people thought he was going to,
2021 was probably one of the better ones in terms of how they panned out. But again, it's been pretty soon on that. And then 2020, James Wiseman in between LaMelo and Anthony Edwards. And 2019, um, I mean, RJ wasn't a star. He's still doing well, obviously. But then also John Zion haven't really panned out the way that we were expecting. They've been all stars, but it's not it's not exactly what we were expecting.
Yeah, that class is really interesting looking back at it. But that's what I was thinking though, is that, none of these three guys I think are going to turn out to be like a Sam Bowie. I feel like they've shown so much more in college than either, Sam Bowie, Darko, even like a Marvin Bagley did. So I don't really see a world where that happens. I'm not sure Cameron Boozer is going to be a good fit. Going back to that on Washington, I'm pretty worried about that. I think Darren Peterson will probably be pretty good. And then I said AJ Devance, I think is the best fit for you guys. I don't like Kingston Flemings on this team. I'm not
Mm.
sure what it is. Obviously, if he's you get the fourth pick, or fifth pick, and Caleb Wilson goes before him, then you take best talent like you said. But I'm just not 100% sure that's what you're looking for. I think Nate Ament, if you guys do fall, if he's available at 7, is a really, really great option for this team as well.
With Nate Met, he's definitely more of a project player. I mean, similar to Giannis. Giannis was a project player, but with Nate Met, I feel like there's a ton of potential for him down the road. But I feel like he's not necessarily someone that's going to come in right away and have a huge impact. Rookies as a whole don't often have a positive impact on franchises. That's pretty rare to come in and contribute as a winning player day one. But I think Nate meant it's going to take a lot longer. And I do think he could definitely develop into an all-star one day, but I want someone that can come in and contribute immediately and rise that little, kind of like how Cooper Flag and Con Knipple have been doing this year. And in my mind, Nate Met is great, but I feel like he would be perfect like with the Nets. Like as a team that is stockpiling young guys and developing them, I feel like he would be great there as opposed to Washington.
Yeah. No, that's totally fair. And I think Keaton Wagner could also do pretty good for you guys. I think he also just slides into a role next to somebody like a Trey Johnson. He may come off the bench at first, which you don't want to take somebody that high and go off the bench, but sometimes that's what happens, especially with the roster you guys are going to have in the 2027 year. So, what do you think of the top 7 or 8 guys that we talked about are 2 or 3 of the options that you would not want? Who are the least likely options you think just would not pan out that well in this roster you got going forward?
Well, I mean, there is, I think Kingston Flemings. I very much like him as a prospect, but I don't know if he's going to make sense with all the guards we already have. We touched on Nate Immense some. I feel like kind of in the same boat as Kingston Flemings is also McKill Brown Jr. of Louisville. Another impressive young point guard, but just someone that I feel like isn't going to necessarily fit super well with the Wizards. He's also not a great 3-point shooter, and 3-point shooting is something that I very much value and the modern NBA values as well. And while there's he could definitely improve and get better, just off the bat, I don't want to draft a young point guard when we're loaded at the guard spot and one that's not a great 3-point shooter at that. So I'd say probably those three are in my mind as guys where I wouldn't be as excited about them. But hopefully this isn't even a discussion we need to end up having because we end up with a top 3 pick. But we'll see. The lottery gods are very interesting in how they work.
Definitely, yeah. So I wanted to ask you this too. I'm really high on Keyshawn George. I think he has a higher ceiling than I thought he had originally. But you said you would probably move him to the bench instead of Trey Johnson. Is that because of the dynamic of the team, or you just believe in his ceiling more and his development more? Because imagine you guys are going to want to win next year, and maybe he is not leading to winning as much as Keyshawn George is in 2027. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I very much believe in Keyshawn. And depending on where we end up drafting this rookie, if this ends up being a guy that's a 7th or 8th pick, I could very much see that rookie coming off the bench for Keyshawn as they're still learning the system and things of that nature. Like Trey Johnson wasn't a starter from day one. He had to very much work his way up and earn his minutes. But I do think he's earned being a full-time starter next year. And we'll see through training camp and things of that nature. So Keyshawn George could very much end up starting the year. But if we have an uber talented young guy that's coming in and doing crazy stuff right off the bat, then there's only 5 starting spots, only 5 guys on the court at one time. And I still think he'll get plenty of minutes. He could still end up playing like 30 or more minutes a game. I just think it'll be in an off the bench role, just practically the way things work out and with the guys we have.
So what about if you get it anywhere in top 3? I mean, you could get this guy 1, 2, or 3. It's all pretty interchangeable as of right now, today in February. Say you
Yeah.
guys pick Aaron Peterson, 6'6", 205, relatively small frame as of right now. Would you want to put him and Trey at the 2 and 3 next to Trey Young, or
No.
would you want to keep Keyshawn?
You would probably want one of the two of them next to Trey Young and then Keyshawn at the 3. I can't imagine a lineup where we're going Trey Young, Trey Johnson, Darren Peterson, and then 2 bigs. I think you could run it at times, but not as a starting lineup you're debuting every night. No.
Or like a closing lineup as well?
Yeah, if we're running with a new guard that's a draft pick, then I think Keyshawn probably makes more sense to stay at the 3, and then it's that guard and Trey Johnson are fighting for minutes.
Okay, but somebody like that answer, Caleb Wilson, you would probably have him starting over
I
Keyshawn,
would
you'd say?
imagine so, yes.
Gotcha. And obviously, you said Anthony Davis, plenty of injury problems. I don't. It's so unlikely that this guy plays even 60, 65 games next year, right? So that should leave plenty of playing time for somebody like Keyshawn George or Caleb Wilson, kind of stepping in his role. You know what I mean, right?
I do, yeah. And who knows? Maybe after this full like off-season recover, Anthony Davis could play 80 games. Maybe he has a fully healthy season for the first time, and he just goes on an absolute tear, and is an all-star again. Maybe makes an All NBA team, and just really
I've
to
heard this
anchor this
before.
Wizards
That little,
team.
that little twinkle in your eye went away when I said 60, 65 at most.
I'm just saying, why put a limit on it now? The sky is the limit if he's healthy.
That's right. If he's healthy, Mr. Glass
Let
we
me
call.
dream. Let me dream.
Oh yeah, you're good. You tell me. It's a. I mean, I understand, especially in Washington. You guys, this is hope. There's a lot of potential here. You got to grasp onto it, right?
Yeah, that was my quote from a podcast a few episodes when we traded for Trey Young. I have hope now. Anthony Davis is bringing me even more hope. That combined with the young core and this pick, I feel like how the Knicks felt in Knicks fans in the 2019 offseason when they thought they were about to get Zion Williamson with the number one pick and get KD and Kyrie Irving. And they were about to
Yeah,
have
I
this big
forgot
three.
about
I
that.
feel like that, but it's like more assured at this point. Like, because even if we don't get the top, even if we don't get the first pick, if we get the third pick, I'm still happy with that at the end of the day. The third pick has a very high hit rate. So I feel like those Knicks fans, but with like a little more assurance, because the guys are already on my team as opposed to, oh, they're gonna sign in New York.
I would be careful talking about that 2019 Knicks draft. Darian Peterson might turn into RJ Barrett, and then you have RJ Barrett in your team.
I don't know. I feel like AJ DeBonsa is a lot more likely to turn into RJ Barrett. They're a lot more similar as far as like their pure player archetype. And I feel like that's kind of the floor for DeBonsa is being an RJ Barrett type of player, which isn't a terrible floor, but given how high his ceiling could be as well, I I hope he ends up, an
Maybe
all-star.
through
And
play styles, but I mean, I feel like a 6'9" RJ Barrett's kind of terrifying.
how tall is RJ Barrett?
He's 6'6" on a good day.
Good day. Okay, so a few inches taller, yeah. And especially if he shoots at a higher volume. And it's not that RJ Barrett isn't athletic, but I was going back through, I think a few weeks ago, and I was watching RJ Barrett highlights and dunks at Duke, and then like watching AJ DeBonsa dunks and highlights at BYU. And it's just different. Like RJ is very much like he would get a pass from someone or finish a lob or just be like the exclamation mark on a play after a steal. Whereas DeBonsa and like Caleb Wilson too, like they go off the dribble, and part of it's being like respectively the guys on their team, whereas RJ Barrett wasn't. AJ and Caleb Wilson will just like go off the dribble, and they'll finish with their own exclamation point after writing the whole sentence. RJ would have other guys write the sentence, and he would be the punctuation.
But he finished him kind of aggressively too. I remember he had a couple dunks at Duke that I really liked. So
Yeah,
I
no,
think
he
this as
definitely was.
well. So this is something I went on the podcast and said as well with CJ was that I'm not sure how Alex R and Anthony Davis next to each other are going to fit. I mean, you have two 4.5s. Neither of those guys should be playing or should be or want to play the five. I assume in theory you're going to push Alex R to the five, but he's 50 pounds lighter than Anthony Davis is. Next to each other, he is 50 pounds lighter. He's the lightest center in the NBA. I just think that's a really weird combination out loud, and I wanted your like full opinion about that.
Well, I think you have to look about it differently on offense and defense. Defensively, AD very well might end up guarding a five if it's a Joel Embiid or a Nikola Jokic type, simply because of weight and style. And so AD might be guarding the five on one end, but that doesn't mean he's playing like it on offense with whatever system they're running. He could still be playing as more of a four or Alex R as a stretch five or whatever they want to do on offense. They can still make it work schematically where they can find roles that they're happy in while still guarding the matchups that make the most sense on the defensive end. So I don't feel like it has to be an extreme trade off with either of them. I think there's a way where everyone can be happy.
That sounds like an optimistic Wizards fan. I love
Hell
to hear.
yeah. Very
All right,
optimistic.
that's all we have for today. Thank you guys for listening. Please sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.